Connecticut East This Week is supported by...
Don't let harmful mold damage your property and cause health concerns. Call the experts at Service Master by Mason to eliminate harmful mold and mildew from your home or business. Call today, 860-455-1249 or servicemasterbymason.com.
It's happening on our roads more and more, wrong way driving. So when and how do you tell your family member it's time to stop driving and turn in their license? Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. Wrong way driving on our roads and highways is on the increase, and here in Connecticut over the last few years, it got to such a point that new alert technology has been placed on affected roads and on off-ramps across the state to try and combat the problem. Alcohol or driving under the influence is one of the main reasons for wrong way driving, but increasingly cognitive impairment associated with aging is also becoming more of an issue. And even if you live in an area that is well served with public transport, at what point do you have that conversation with a loved one about their health and their ability to continue driving? I spoke with Waterford PD, my local police department, about how they deal with the problem. And I also sat down with Tony Guerrera, the Commissioner of the Connecticut DMV, about their policies and procedures when it comes to taking away someone's driving license. Officer Mark Devine of the Waterford Police Department. You're part of the patrol division here at Waterford Police. Talk to us about, and we're particularly interested in, the wrong way driving that occurs, not just here in Waterford, but it's a problem across the state, and it's a problem across the nation as well, but it is a problem across the state. What is it that you see when these things happen?
A lot of times we run into one of two scenarios with a wrong way driver. A lot of times it's going to be either a person that's intoxicated or under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And a good portion of the other times is going to be an elderly person that is either confused by signage or perhaps has a cognitive impairment or a medical reason why that they have gone the wrong way on the roadway.
How difficult or easy is it, unfortunately, to go the wrong way?
In some areas, you can definitely find it a lot easier to make that mistake. There might just be a small Jersey barrier separating an on-ramp and an off-ramp where someone could easily turn up. The state has been very proactive in upgrading all of those ramps and giving wrong way indicators, so they'll have flashing lights and signs that'll let people know that they're going the wrong way. And I think that has definitely brought down the amount of people getting all the way up to the highway from the ramps that we've had in the past.
Generally, what sort of time are these types of things happening?
A lot of times it could be early in the morning, it could also be in the evening or late at night, because a lot of times darkness is one of them, especially with our elderly drivers. Night vision starts going first before other vision. Some people actually have restrictions where they shouldn't be driving at night, and a lot of times I've had situations where a driver was rushing fast because they knew the sun was going down and trying to get something done before the sun went down, so they got stopped for the fact that they were speeding because they were trying to do the right thing of not drive at night, but unfortunately they were going quite over the speed limit to try to accomplish that goal.
What it is that you have to do as a police officer when you're confronted with this situation, because it can be very dangerous for both of you, can't it? Because somebody else is in a vehicle, they could be, like you said, possibly travelling at speed or starting to ramp that speed up.
Wrong way drivers, especially once you get onto a limited access highway like 95 or 395, are extremely dangerous because it's very difficult to try to stop them because we're not going to put ourselves going the wrong way. We also are very cognizant that we don't want to be driving the wrong way, so there's ways to stop it. I had one incident many years ago with a wrong way driver on 395. The vehicle was going southbound in the northbound lane. It was going probably close to 100 miles an hour from the reports that we were getting. So we didn't have very many options. We didn't have anyone available in that area. It was coming from Plainfield. We were down in Montville, and it was going so fast they were calling it out into Norwich before we even were heading that way. So we were waiting at the Norwich-Montville line with stop sticks, and we were able to stop it. Now it happened to be an intoxicated driver, not a wrong-way driver. One thing we do find with wrong-way drivers is they tend to go to the right when they're driving, which means that they're in the left lane. So one of the things I always tell new drivers and anyone we talk to when we speak about driving is at night, if you're on the highway, always stay to the right lane. Don't be traveling in the left lane. especially late at night when people are out there. For that reason, they tend to think to drive safe when they're doing it. However, they're going the wrong way, and they tend to be driving to the right. I've seen fatal accidents where they've come off a ramp and they've shot right over to that left lane going the wrong way because that person's trying to go to the right. And it's one of the tendencies that tends to happen when people are doing that.
So talk to us about a stop with somebody who is maybe elderly, has some cognitive issues. How do you deal with that?
Training through the academy and additional training that we get ongoing throughout the years, we'll talk of different reasons for different ways to handle people with dementia, from just if they're found wandering or if they're driving. But in any of these circumstances, whether they have dementia or if they're just confused, we have to look at what's going on in the situation we have at the moment. Usually there's a reason why we stop them, a violation, or a lot of times it's for a traffic accident, which could be minor or more severe. But a lot of times we end up finding, through talking to them, one, how they're answering our questions, if they're able to seem that they're clear-headed and not injured from the accident. But also, we take a look at the car. I had one accident at 395 and Route 85 where the person went right through the red light. So right off the bat, that's a concern. It's a busy intersection. I'm talking with the person. She seems a little confused, but she had a decent strike, so there was concern there. But then I start looking around the car, and there's damage to the rear of the car. She hit with the front. I asked her about that. She said, I bumped into a car in the parking lot a couple weeks ago. Okay. I walked around the other side, and there's guardrail damage on the other side. And I said, did you hit the guardrail when you were coming down here? She said, no, that's all damage from about a month ago. So multiple accidents, acting strange. She informed me that she was taking some new medications over the past month, and she gets a little foggy sometimes. So those were some concerns where I ended up taking her license and forwarded that out to DMV so she could get a medical review.
So talk to us a little bit more about what happens when you have to do that.
Anytime that we end up deciding that we have to take someone's license, or even if the car is just undrivable for whatever reason, we do try to have a family member come to the scene anyway. A lot of times the family member is going to give us more insight as well, so that'll also aid us in the decision we're going to make, or they may have already informed us that they've already started working on that with their physician to have a review done. But we definitely want to make sure that we have someone there with them. We don't try to just say, you're on your own, go with the tow truck, because especially if they have any type of confusion or if they're not familiar with the area, we want to make sure that they have someone with them that's going to be able to assist them.
You remove the license from them. What happens then? Because there's a protocol involved in that, isn't there?
Yeah, I'll seize the license right then. I'll inform them that they're not allowed to drive at this time. I then will fill out a form when I get back to the police station. That goes to DMV. It's one of their forms, explaining the circumstances of why I took it. I will also then type up a report for the incident that we had, which will go into a little bit further detail on everything and why it added up and why I ended up taking the license, so that DMV has a full record of the reasons why we seized the person's license on that day.
And then from that point on, that's then, a DMV issue?
Correct. At that point, DMV will review it and they have a whole section that's set for that, and then they also have a medical review board if they feel that one of their seizures needs to go to that, where they can have it reviewed by multiple people.
Nobody wants to have their independence taken away. Age can be a cruel thing. I know that the police departments have got so much better in trying to do outreach, because it is a difficult time to take that away from an individual. Talk to us about some of the programs that the Water Police have got or maybe have been doing to try and do that outreach.
We're very fortunate. Officer Fredericks is our community outreach officer, and he does a lot of work with multiple different agencies throughout the town, and in multiple towns actually. But he works very closely with our senior services group, and we also I've been over with senior services several times with him, and we've actually spoken about what to be looking for and how we can have that conversation and let them know that it's normal and it's not something that's they've done wrong or anything. It's just as time goes, sometimes we get to the point where we shouldn't drive, and maybe we shouldn't drive at night. So it's teaching people that sometimes it's about their limits. Sometimes it's about that it's beyond that time where for their safety and other people's safety that they shouldn't be driving. We'll also tell them some of the stories that we had, and also make sure that they're just aware of what they have and what is available to them.
What closing message would you say to anybody listening to this? Because nobody wants to have that conversation, but the reality is at some point you have to.
You have to realize going in and speaking in a nice, calm, compassionate way with a family member is going to be much more appreciated. I know sometimes we're quick to say, you shouldn't be driving anymore, or that. It's find the right time to sit down, have a long conversation, Maybe it's limiting driving and then moving to that. Maybe it's making sure that they know what they have for resources so that they're not going to be left out.
Officer Mark Devine of Waterford PD, thank you ever so much for talking to us, explaining to us about, one, the job that you all have to do and deal with, but also the compassion that goes along with it as well, and also that very important situation about having that conversation, as hard as it may be, with somebody at the end of the day, obviously being a member of your family. So thank you ever so much for taking the time to talk to us about this.
All right, thanks for having me.
Commissioner Tony Guerrera of the Department of Motor Vehicles in the state of Connecticut. We're talking about when a license is seized by a local police department. They send documentation forms to Connecticut DMV. Talk to us about what happens when a license is seized by police, and then obviously the process for DMV starts.
Sure, Brian. And I want to thank you for bringing this podcast to the public, because it's an important issue. And sometimes we don't talk about seniors and our parents or our loved ones that reach a certain age and unfortunately have to have some difficult conversations with them in regards whether we should take their license away. Because it's a tough thing, Brian. You've had it since you've been 16, and now someone's telling you that you can't drive on the road anymore. And it's a very difficult process, not even for family members, but the individual himself or herself that is going to be losing their license. But with that said, let's take an incident where a police officer should pull somebody over and notices that when they communicate with that individual, that they seem confused, that they ask them, where do you live? Where were you going? And every answer that they give the officer is not the right answer. That is the time where the officer will then seize the vehicle, seize the license, and ask them to call a family member to come pick them up. And then that license then is brought over. Determine how they document the license, Brian. All right, that's important. Where they say there's been some confusion, there's been some clarity, or almost like some issues of dementia happening, then it comes to the DMV for us to pull the license from them. And then we tell the individual that for them to restore their license, they're going to have to get a medical provider to substantiate that they're fit to drive behind the wheel of a motor vehicle.
So just talk to us a little bit about that. Are they able just to go and find their own medical provider, or does the DMV say we have a list of providers that we would prefer that you go and see?
They can go to their own provider, but again, it's an in-depth form, Brian, that really the provider is signing that this individual is capable of driving on our roadways. And that's the provider's put himself on the line now too, saying that, again, obviously, if you pass all the tests, when it comes to cognizant test or whatever, and the doctor feels as though that individual can perform the duties behind the wheel, they will sign it. But if they see issues that are going on, they have no problem saying that they believe that this person is not capable of driving on our roadways, especially with eyesight or memory loss or whatever it may be.
Give us a little bit of a time frame of how quickly this can happen.
I believe it's a 30-day process. Once this has happened, then they have to get the form in to the medical provider. The medical provider writes up the evaluation and then sends it back to our driver services unit to determines whether it's good or bad in regards to that individual getting their license back.
So in a specific circumstance here, if we have a driver situation and there's a confirmed diagnosis of some form of dementia that comes back on that medical report, does that necessarily preclude that individual from driving or having a driver's license or not?
Again, that's a good question. I am not a medical provider. I think it all depends on how it's written. And then our people up in driver services will review that. And there are certain keywords that are used that will distinguish whether that individual should be driving or not be driving. And if they are able to drive, it's immediate. After 30 days, they'll send them out their license again, and they're ready to be driving back on the roadways.
If someone has received a diagnosis of dementia, When should you be having that conversation with that family member? What guidance is there that you can possibly point us to?
I want to put things in perspective here too, is that the DMV is, again, we're an agency that is a licensing agency, but those conversations really need to take place at home. And they're tough conversations. As a former legislator too, that it was under the Transportation Committee at the time, these topics would always come up, whether individuals should have a relicense test at a certain age. But then you look at the data, and the data shows that people over 60 have less accidents than people between, say, 20 to 30 or whatever it may be. So those conversations never ended up going anywhere at the legislature, but there were topics that were brought up saying, listen, who knows better than the caretakers, the family members that really should sit down with their loved ones to have that discussion. And what I will say now, what I've seen over the last probably 3 or 4 years, Brian, is that these conversations don't wait till they're 70 or 80 or even in their 90s. These conversations are happening when you're in your 50s, where kids are basically having a conversation at the dinner table saying, Mom and Dad, there's going to be a time where that maybe you can't drive. All right. Let's talk about this now. What would you like us to do if we start to see something happening? And at that time, hopefully there's no dementia happening with the individuals. And they have these important conversations that say, that, Brian or Tony, you're my son, and I'm going to tell you, you need to do what's best for me and what's best to protect people out there. If that means that my license needs to be pulled, then I'm giving you the authority to do that. And I will sign something that says that, which makes it easier too sometimes. But sometimes they're tough conversations, but they should have conversations not at the time when they reach the dementia or whatever may be the disability that they've received, but earlier on, so everybody's on the same page.
Great advice. I just want us to carry on that. Is there a way for people, because it is a difficult conversation to have, and if you are having it earlier, as you just said, that's absolutely great. But I think we can both agree that isn't always the case as well. So when you get into that sticky situation where you do have that older parent and you're trying to deal with this, is it a situation where can people report to the DMV directly their concerns if they have someone, a family member, or do they have to go through their police department? Because nobody wants to be a snitch. But at the end of the day, this is about the safety of not only that family member, but the safety of people on the roads as well.
Absolutely. And a very good question. Nobody likes to be a snitch, and I agree. But I think that what helps with all this is that the family members have a conversation with the physician of that individual. And then they go visit the physician, and there's a meeting amongst the 3 or 4 of them, the family members and the doctor and the individual that's impacting, that says that I've done some tests or whatever it is, and I'm going to have to send something in to the Department of Motor Vehicles saying that based upon your last physical examination, shows that it's A, B, C, and D, and I do not recommend that you get behind the wheel any longer. So those are conversations that I would recommend to any family member, that the family physician be involved in any of the decision making, because sometimes it also might make it easier for the individual that's losing their license to hear it from an independent individual that basically is not there to try to hurt me or to help to say, let him do it. It's an independent review that he's doing it for all the best reasons. Let's put it that way.
Commissioner Guerrera, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
And if you have a family member or know someone that you feel may need to have that conversation about whether they should still be driving, then contact your local police department to see if they have any programs in your area that you and your family can attend, or speak with a medical professional. But most importantly, don't wait and have that conversation. You could be saving not only their life, but other lives as well.
Remember, always be generous with the nutmeg. Just eyeball it.
Okay.
Mom's wisdom has served you well.
But now, it may be your turn to guide her.
Hey, I'm worried about Mom. She keeps forgetting her famous sweet potato pie recipe.
Some things come with age, sis.
And some don't.
Knowing the early signs of Alzheimer's in a loved one will help you make the best decisions for your family. Visit 10signs.org to learn the signs. Brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. Around 300 electric boat employees who are members of the Marine Draftsmen's Association Local 571 held a May Day rally and march recently as part of their ongoing contract dispute with the company. The event was held on International Workers' Day at Fort Griswold State Park in Groton, an historic battlefield site. Bill Lewis is the president of Local 571 and said talks with Electric Boat have stalled over issues for better pensions and a cost of living adjustment or COLA.
General Dynamics already has it in Land Systems who do the tanks. They already have it in Bath Iron Works, General Dynamics, that do it. Why is it so hard to even get a conversation for General Dynamics Electric Boat to give a COLA to their employees who build the product, who create the profits for those at the top? While we struggle every year, every contract, we go further and further behind.
Lewis also said with Electric Boat refusing to offer a better deal and contract, the time for talking was fast coming to an end.
This is official. Right now, we're putting the company on the clock, and they will get this. And May 18th at 11:59 is our strike deadline, midnight of the 18th of May. That's when we will be on strike.
Just a day before the May Day rally, Electric Boat announced a $12 billion new contract for submarine work from the U.S. Navy. Connecticut East This Week asked EB whether this money will be used to settle the contract dispute and was told they had no comment on that particular question, but would continue dialogue with the union to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. The dispute affects around 1,800 Electric Boat workers in Groton and New London. The Connecticut State Comptroller's Office released a report recently about the number of fire departments and firefighters in the state. It's the first time such a comprehensive survey has been conducted into the state's fire service in over a decade. Comptroller Sean Scanlon said the report shows there is a firefighter recruitment and retention crisis in the state.
We are losing firefighters. We've gained them on the career side. There's been a 6% uptick on the career side. But we've seen about a 60% decline on the volunteer side. When 61% of the communities in our state are served exclusively by volunteer departments, that 60% cut is being felt in communities everywhere in the state of Connecticut.
Paul Januszewski is the fire chief for North Haven Fire Department and said his volunteer firefighter numbers have dropped from 105 to just 16.
Firefighter recruitment and retention needs to become a priority. We can no longer offer just tax abatements for a few $1,000s and expect that to cover the hundreds of hours that our volunteer firefighters put into training and the unpredicted, unplanned response to emergencies. On the career side, we've seen the decline of the number of applicants. Vacancies which once had hundreds or thousands of applicants for just a handful of jobs, we now see a fraction of that.
Januszewski says already he has 2 fire stations in his command area that are shut during the day because of a lack of volunteer firefighters to staff them. The report recommends the state creates and upkeeps a list of fire chiefs across Connecticut, the creation of a fire department map to show exact coverage areas of each fire department, and to conduct a regular census on firefighter numbers. The Regionalized Human Trafficking Recovery Task Force of Greater Hartford Region released a new report detailing how victims of human trafficking are failing to be dealt with by the state's system response. Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysowitz, who chairs the Governor's Council on Women and Girls, said the number of reported children exploited in the state in 2023 was over 300, and that number was likely more.
This is a very underreported crime, and we also know that kids of color, undocumented kids, are the ones who are the most at risk. We know that in marginalized communities, children are at greater risk of human trafficking, and we are seeing more and more cases in our communities involving undocumented immigrant children.
The new report was the result of a multi-agency approach to look into the journey of a human trafficking victim in the state. Crystal Rich is the co-chair of the Regional Human Trafficking Task Force, as well as executive director of the Connecticut Children's Alliance, and said the report looked at both child and adult human trafficking and mapped the journeys of both and identified 7 key challenges. Rich explained one of their biggest findings.
One of the biggest takeaways from this project is that the absence of a centralized statewide structure for our state's human trafficking response leads to confusion around roles, responsibility sometimes placed on the wrong entity, a lack of services that cover the full spectrum of care, inconsistent service delivery, and gaps in accountability. Simply put, a fragmented approach is not a victim-centered approach.
The new report will be presented to the state's Trafficking Persons Council on May 15th to convene a recommendations group of state leaders and advocates to help refine policies and move forward on the report's 7 key challenges. And Connecticut State Fire Marshal Lori Volkert and State Fire Administrator Jeff Morissette have issued a warning about a recent social media trend as seen on TikTok and other platforms, encouraging students to short-circuit their personal or school-issued electronic devices by inserting a pencil lead or other conductive object into the USB or other charge ports. The resulting short circuit can generate sparks and significant amounts of smoke, resulting in a fire that can easily spread. It can also lead to the internal battery to experience what's called thermal runaway and ignition. Volkert says it is vitally important that youth and adults take fire risks seriously and recognize the danger inherent to these types of social media challenges, as fire can become uncontrolled and turn deadly in just a few seconds. Already there have been several reported incidents at Connecticut schools in the past several days, and school districts across the state are warning both parents and students of the risks associated with the dangerous trend that can cause personal injury and property damage. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.